Hello, that time of summer when the garden's producing in full swing. We're just buried in produce. We're going to go through a simple way to store things today by treating these green beans with pressure canning. Now, pressure canning is a little bit different because green beans are a non-acidic vegetable. Tomatoes, salsa, that type of stuff. We'll just do the boiling water method, but that's for another show. Starting out with any canning process, preparation is typically the key. You'll want to take your green beans and rinse them, clean them in the sink, also come through and trim the ends, make sure that you get any bad spots or anything else off of them. While you're in that process, a good trick here is to take the jar that you're canning with. This is a quart jar, you can also get them in pint size, and simply place a bean next to it as a guide. So then as you're going through, you can put shorter beans into a kind of a scrap pile, and you can keep the longer beans by themselves in a different one. So when you're loading the jars, it'll be a little bit easier for you. So as I was saying, preparation is always good. A pressure canner, we have water boiling in it. We also have hot water boiling on the stove to use to fill the green bean jars. We've got a dish of soapy water here, just basically anything we're going to use in the canning process we want to sterilize first. You can also use the sanitize cycle on your dishwasher. We've got a hot water bath here, just keeping jars warm so that we don't get any thermal shock or damage any glass by dropping them in the boiling water later. So now that we have our jar, we'll come in, we'll start packing our green beans in here. And by keeping them about the same size, you can get a little bit better packing efficiency by placing them in there like this. If you want to, you can definitely take these beans, cut them into 1.5 inch, 2 inch pieces and leave them in there just kind of loose. However, that does take more jars equals more money. So it's kind of your personal preference. So this is our last jar. We're going to use our kind of the scrap pieces here and make sure those get in as well. Now these are going to be the beans that were, a little bit spindlier, they were more curvy than straight, and you'll kind of see here what I was talking about with all the void spaces we'll start to build. I want to give it a shake every once in a while, make sure you're getting consolidation. But basically just fill the beans into the jar. This particular recipe with a quart jar, you want to leave about 1 inch of headspace. And that's from the top of the water level or to the top of the jar. So that typically on a quart jar here, or a regular mouth quart jar, is right where the glass tapers up to the neck. So we'll keep placing the beans in here until we're out of beans, and our recipe calls for 1 teaspoon of salt per quart jar. Alright, now we'll add the salt to the top of our jar here before adding our boiling water. I'm going to bring it over to my filling station, gently set it in the warm water to keep it warm while we're waiting. So I'm going to grab that pot of boiling water I had, our jar funnel here, and just basically fill the jar up to that 1 inch mark. And that's going to be right about when the glass starts to taper in, somewhere in there. Now, you don't have to get it right on the first time, just get the jar started is kind of the big part. And then you can always come by later and add a little bit more to top it off, kind of get them right. So, once we get these filled up, it's off to the canner. Alright, once you have your jars all filled with the boiling water, you want to attach the lids and the sealers and then the rings. We'll take your jar, jar mover here, we'll move it over to our pressure canner where we've got our boiling water. Make sure we got a little bit of space, but relatively evenly spaced. One key thing, you do want to maintain 1 inch of water over the top of the jars. So you can see we're just a little bit shy of that, so I'm going to take a little bit more of my boiling water that I was using for putting inside the jars. We'll just top this off here to be good. So once we've done that, we'll want to attach the pressure cover here, making sure it fits on, and closing until it locks. So now this is your pressure gauge. This will read once we seal it up. This will also tell you when you're actually building pressure. Now this is your kind of your relief valve or your pressure control. And this is the pressure regulator here. So now that we've got our oven set on a relatively high temperature in the back there, we want to bring this vessel to a boil. As that water changes to steam, it will expand, and in that process it will build pressure within this. As you increase the pressure within this container, the temperature at which water boils will raise roughly 3 degrees for every 1 pound of pressure applied. So in this particular recipe, it calls for processing these quart jars for 25 minutes at 11 pounds of pressure. And you can see just past 10 there's that black line. Now, you do not start the 25 minutes until you have reached that 11 pounds. As you can see, you can hear it's kind of boiling. Once this safety valve pops up, it will start to build pressure, and we'll hopefully see some stuff come across this gauge. Alright, we've reached 11 pounds of pressure, which is when our time officially starts for the processing of the pressure jars. For quart jars and green beans, it's 25 minutes. So if any time that your needle drops below 11 pounds, you need to restart that time after you've rebuilt that pressure. As you can see, our pressure is still continuing to rise. So what's actually happening there is we need to turn down our heat on the stove slightly. Of course, you don't want to do anything too drastic and actually lose pressure. But if your needle continues to climb, you start having issues, using a hot pad, again, this is filled with 240 degree steam, very dangerous. You want to just gently touch this regulator here and release some of that pressure. And you can see our needle drop back down to the kind of the top end of 11 there. Once 25 minutes have passed, turn off the stove and move the pressure cooker gently over to this other side of the stove. Allow it to cool naturally. Once the pressure reads 0 in the container here, probably about an hour and a half, you'll want to open the container, pull the jars out, set them out on a cooling rack with about 1 inch of space between them. Next morning, 12 to 24 hours later, you want to come in and retighten the lids.